Barbie, Oppenheimer, Pac-12 Media Day. One of these things, not like the others. Terrible. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Baylor. Drake Toll alongside Nathan Brown at Big 12 Mafia at B12 Mafia on Twitter. Huge week for media, including Locked On Baylor. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day as we dive into the masterpiece of what media is between Oppenheimer and Barbie, the big screen this week, and in the middle of it, crapping all over it, the Pac-12. What a joke of a week for that conference.
Yeah, I don't know how it could have gone worse. They come out and say nothing's going to be talked about, and then they say, well, we're not talking about it because we don't want to talk about it, which insinuated maybe that something was done, but really wasn't. I don't think it could have been much worse.
So diving into this, Mafia, I'm looking at the comments from Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff, and what is baffling to me is what he says. There is not a concern, and that the schools are committed to the Pac-12, and they simply are feeling this out, getting better offers as time goes on. I have a question for you. I don't know how much business you've done or how much work you've done in the real world, but it's a lot. At any company you've been at that you can tell is going under, when the stocks are falling, is that usually a good sign that you're getting better offers from investors?
No, that's the time when liquidation is coming and everybody's freshening their resumes. It's, I'm reminded of the Seinfeld skit where they're negotiating their TV deal to do their little pilot. And George says, I'm going to go back and negotiate a bigger number, loses it, ends up getting it back, but it was for a third or a half of what they originally were offered. So, yeah, it couldn't be much worse.
So looking at these comments and really the entire string of what Media Day was, especially in the wake of losing UCLA and USC, what is so interesting to me is that wasn't the only, and I'm going to call them lies because you hear them as media and as fans, you think there's just no way that's true. There's no way that the Pac-12 is getting so many good offers that they're simply holding out for the marquee one. It's not how business works. And even more so, Commissioner says that recruiting has never been stronger. The talent in the conference has never been stronger. To me, from my perspective, it feels like you're lying to a camera that goes out to millions of people to say that you've lost your two biggest brands, your two best teams over the last 50 years, and then say without them, now recruiting is even better.
Yeah, I mean, he used the same tactic in December when they were talking about people not wanting to leave the conference and people at UCLA wanting to come back. They were upset they went to the Big Ten. It's just ridiculous. Now, whether he's being deceitful, outright lying, or he's just spinning a narrative to keep his own people on side, whatever it is, the world isn't receiving it well. We've spoken about it many times, and at the end of the day, the silence is not good in negotiation. And I've been in business many years, as you said, and I can't remember the last time that an active negotiation was going on where it ended up being good because the people didn't talk to each other. So it doesn't make any sense.
Along with that, the 10 schools that remain have talked about the grant of rights and what that would look like. The Pac-12 has been clear that these schools want to stay together if the right media deal is there. In my view, Colorado, Arizona, even Utah, they're holding out with the TV deal. When it is signed, if it isn't up to par, the jump for a different conference is going to be there. It has to be. These schools want to make money, especially more than the Pac-12 currently has on the table. In your opinion, let's talk positive. What is the best case scenario here based off the last week of what we've seen for the Pac-12?
The best case scenario would be taking all the information and negotiation that's gone up to now, and then this late notice that maybe Fox is back in, probably on a tier 2 or tier 3 package. It gives them enough that they can get back to maybe 22 or 23 million. They sign on, and Washington and Oregon, Utah, and probably Stanford and Cal are hoping that that 3-year term, 4-year term, whatever it is, buys them a little time. They can stay together, and at the end of the day, they'll be backfilled if they reorganize, if they ended up leaving later on.
Then when you look at the flip side of this, now, to me, that is the most realistic best case scenario. It's not sunshine and rainbows. That is a possibility. I don't think that ESPN, Fox are completely out of this thing yet. The number's just not going to be where the Pac-12 wants it, and there's no reason for that number to bump up. Nothing about this product is good enough for ESPN or Fox to say, oh, yeah, we have been holding out to give you a better offer. Thanks for being patient with us. That's not how this works. Talking worst case scenario, then, realistically, worst case scenario, even in the short term, because it feels like this thing's moving fast. Mafia, where do you sit? Worst case scenario with the
Pac-12? Everybody knows Yormark returns from his Italy trip today. And there have been a lot of people talking over the last several weeks about when a move could be made and whether it would have to be timed to the GOR. I asked a few people around, and no, they're not tied together. So anytime this week, basically Colorado pulls the pin. I mean, they were not happy to be there in the first place, unless that was a huge act. When they lashed out and left in a hurry or didn't say anything, they weren't rewarded by their pressuring on Thursday to find out what those media numbers would be. So it would be Colorado leaving, and then the number drops. So say if they're 22 or 23 million in the best case scenario, Colorado leaves, they're going to lose $4, $5, or $6 million on that contract, just knowing they're not going to be there. And then everybody else pulls, they start to pull the pin left and right. I have a feeling that Utah and Arizona State are bound and determined to stay. And I think that Arizona they're not real brave. They're not a brave organization. They're not willing to make that leap. They never have. Not in 1977 is the last time they left conference. So Colorado's done this before in the recent past. So I don't think there would be any reason for them to stay just to stay. They're not going to be the premium brand in the conference anyway. They're going to be a tier 2 or tier 3 game anyway. Why not come and do that for more exposure and a better media deal?
Why are these teams, namely an organization like Utah, brand like Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, why are these schools still holding on to the Pac-12 when Yormark has already talked about expansion? And while the grass isn't always greener, the money is in other places.
I don't think it's about money at all, Drake. I think money is done. I think at the end of the day, they're looking for the exposure. They want to be at that 50% linear, 50% online, direct to consumer digital. And if they can get that, they're willing to stay together because these presidents aren't athletic people. Yeah. Most of them are leaders of massive educational and research organizations, and they have that in common. So at the end of the day, if they don't leave, it's probably because the education and research won out in the exposure and realignment discussion, which, if you think about it, seems reasonable. It's a hassle to change conferences. They want to stay together because they've been together, but they should know they're dead men walking. The conference is not going to live past 2026, 2027, when Oregon and Washington and whoever else gets that call from the Big Ten, because it's coming.
Yeah. Mafia, I now want to get into some more of these details of the TV deal, whether it goes to streaming, how the Pac-12 can keep things together, and from a money standpoint, if they can come close to reaching what the Big 12 has done under Brett Yormark. I want to remind everybody, you are listening to Locked On Baylor. It's the part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your Baylor Bears every day. Bringing you back to tell you about eBay Motors. Dude, I have a clunker. So I went to the shop, got my my new Impala they gave me here in Alaska. I got my everything serviced. Like, you know what? It's got 2 flat tires, literally 2 flat tires. Let's see what it looks like. And when I got the report back, it said damaged, all caps, very damaged. this car is totaled. So I'm driving a totaled car around town. You know why it's totaled? Because they can't find the parts that are cheap enough to make this car still value above what it's already worth. Still valuable above what it's already worth. Words. So what did I do? I went to eBay Motors. My bumper's hanging down. I got a new bumper. My headlight's out. I got a new headlight. All of that and more at eBay Motors. You go there and it's got everything you need. It's the right fit. Because you type in your car, I say 96 Chevy Impala. And they say, wow, that's an old car. And I say, yes, it is. And I have it. And they can give me guaranteed fits for it the first time around. I just plug and play, baby. They know exactly what I want, exactly what I need. You add your ride to my garage part, and it'll fit. The part will fit, or you get your money back. Just like in sports, you need the right fit. Shop on eBay Motors. They give you the right fit. 122 million parts. That's more than I can count. And you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts. Get the right fit. The prices, the right prices. That's what matters the most right now at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay, guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply. All right, Mafia, the idea of streaming here, if you are the Pac-12, are you at a point where you just got to hold on tight to it and say, Apple, take me home?
Yeah, that's it. That's what they're waiting for. There was rumblings that some data came out in late May, early June and by the way, this has sort of been backed up. I talked to Bob Thompson about it. I talked to Jim Williams about it. Apple has definitely wanted to get in for a while, but they want to do it on their own terms. So I think they would buy the whole kit and caboodle, and then they would try to sub-license as many of the games on linear as possible to make them happy. Now, the only problem with that is, do you see Apple buying this premium product and wanting to put their number 2 or number 3 game on? It's hard for me to see they don't want Oregon, Washington. They don't want Utah, Oregon. They don't want, even at this point still USC and Washington. That it just doesn't make sense. So I call this the common sense meter, right? Common sense is going to win out here. Doesn't matter what you and I say. Doesn't matter what George Klyavkov says. What's going to happen is common sense is going to rule, because that's what everybody knows. And doing these sort of off-brand things, will they work for the group if they want to stay together bad enough? Absolutely. But is it going to help them in the 5 or 6 years, especially as exposure is becoming more the rule than the exception? I don't think so. So that's why I don't think it even if they do it, a 2 or 3 year term is about as long as I think this goes.
Now, I don't know if this translates, because you obviously love sports. Do you have an ESPN Plus account?
I do.
Feels like everybody who has an inkling to watch sports at any level, especially college, has an ESPN Plus account. It's not quite the monopoly, but man, it's about as close as you can get, because every sport for your favorite team is pretty much on ESPN Plus if you're in the Power 5. And right now, to me, when Cal is playing Arizona State even, I just don't know how Apple TV is going to get people to pay for a subscription or to renew or to open and go in and seek out that game. Whereas ESPN Plus, I get it. You don't, you want to be on ESPN2, but Baylor and Texas Tech are on ESPN Plus this year. And folks, it's right there. Everybody's got the subscription. It is right there. I just don't see how people are going to seek out this Pac-12 product when it's not on, say, an ESPN Plus, what's right in front of your face.
It's the Achilles heel of the Pac-12. They're geographically locked, and everybody's in bed by the time their people and their games come on. Nobody's around. And if you're a casual fan in Iowa, are you going to subscribe to? And we're not just talking about Apple Plus. The Apple TV app. We're also talking about a subscription fee like they're doing for the MLS. So a guy in Iowa, is he going to buy that just for the Pac-12 coverage? No way. You're going to get the dedicated fans that are either graduates, have family, some other tie to the Pac-12 region, and those are the people that are going to care. And unfortunately, the casual fan, the Pac-12 is going to cease to exist. So that's why that's such a concern. If they don't get 50-50 or maybe 60-40, I just don't know how this thing stays together. It's really sad because the Pac-12 is a storied conference.
Yep.
I come from Washington. I love most of the schools, UCLA and USC. I've never really liked, but I respect every one of those programs. And it's going to be sad when this happens to them, and it's all because they were full of themselves. They weren't willing to change anything that's in their sort of background to moderate and
Yeah.
to come closer to the rest of the college football world.
Mafia, take me back to a time 2.5 years ago where we were having conversations on my show. Man, should Baylor jump ship and go to the Pac-12?
Right.
Should Oklahoma State make this move? With Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, there was the idea of, oh, well, the Big 12 is going to fall apart under Bob Bowlesby. We can all accept it. The conference is dead. Let's go to the Pac-12. Let's latch on to something big. In that moment, did it seem like the Pac-12 was just too closed off to the idea of expansion, and they got cocky at the wrong time when major brands in the Big 12 didn't know if things were going to stay together?
I don't even think they were even considering it. I
Wow.
think a lot of those ideas were coming from other people. And yeah, they would have loved the lifeline at Oklahoma State, right?
Yep.
Baylor, it would have been fantastic to go to the Pac 12, but I'm sorry, they don't look at those schools as equals.
Yeah.
In fact, they barely even recognize anybody else that isn't the Big Ten or
Yeah.
the Ivy League, right? And so when you're in that mode and you're these presidents who are pretty full of themselves. If you're making millions of dollars and you run an organization that employs tens of thousands of people and you're responsible for people who've graduated in the hundreds of thousands, your ego is going to be pretty high. And so that's why I think they're in the shape they are. It's too bad because the Pac-12, if they would have expanded with those 10 schools, look how quickly they would have been
Yep.
relevant. And now that is the third conference, which is why the Big 12, I think, would bring in these Pac-12 schools. Well, maybe they changed their mind on that recently, but I think that would have been a great move to bring
Yeah.
them in, and the Pac-12 and the Big 10, the Big 12 would have gotten a much stronger contract. Would it be SEC level? Probably not, but I bet you could be in the 50s to 60s.
You at least have your idea of we talked about the 3-team power conference with how shaky the ACC is. But we talked about that on your show, where the direction of the ACC and the Pac-12 is going. It's not great. The Big
Right.
12 seems to be the third conference there, the third tier there, right behind the power of the Big 10 and the SEC, which is not a bad place to be if you want to stay alive, be healthy, and be strong. Mafia, and that's where I want to go next. The Big 12. How does this conference take advantage of the dumpster fire we saw over the last week? Right here on Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Mafia. If you're the Big 12, how do you watch this whole thing?
For one thing, let's throw out the window that if they don't pick up any schools, they've failed.
Yeah.
This is now a becoming thing out in the journalistic world. Sports reporters are starting to bring that up. And if I had to trace back all those reports, I guarantee you they would have been probably brought up by 2 or 3 guys in
Yeah.
Pac-12 land. So let's throw that out. That is not the barrier to success for Brett Yormark. He has already made the conference better with Rucker Park, with talking about international and doing things in Mexico, and he's doing a fantastic job.
Yep.
So if you hear that on your show, I know I'm going to do it on my show. Whenever I hear that, I'm going to shoot it down because all it is disinformation. Brett Yormark has already done a great job. So
Yep.
what he needs to do is, I think he doesn't bring on UConn. I think UConn is a grab in 5 or 6 years if
Yep.
they've improved their football enough. Maybe they've come up with a new stadium agreement or something like that. But I think for right now, shut the door. And if Colorado comes, just have it be Colorado. There's no reason you need to stretch and go to a San Diego State or go to any other G5 school. They'll always be there. So why rush it? The media people are going to pay. They've already said that they're going to give P5 money for the pro rata and everything else. Be happy with that. And then shut the door and say, okay, now we're going to go on. And then they'll wait for the ACC and the Pac-12 to disintegrate. But Brett Yormark's already done a great job. I don't think he needs to do anything else.
Let's go more detailed here to a micro level. If you are even a Baylor fan, a BYU fan, as I know that that's where your allegiance is, and two very similar fan bases who are rooted in faith.
Right.
How do you watch this play out, especially when, man, BYU was on its own a couple of years ago, wondering where its future was, and Baylor didn't know if it would still be Power 5. How do you view the happenings of the last week?
I think it's nothing but opportunity.
Mm.
Again, my opinion has been formed, probably for about a month now, that Colorado's probably going to come. Now, if they don't come, will I have egg on my face? Sure, but who cares?
Yeah.
People don't live next to me, so I'm not afraid of being wrong. But it from a BYU standpoint, and I think Baylor would. This is my opinion. I think they would love to see the Four Corners come. Any of them would be fine, but for Utah specifically, you bring in Utah, and against BYU, it's the Holy War.
Yep.
Top 5 rivalry in the country. Then if they bring in Arizona and Arizona State, they have their own thing, the Territorial Cup, where they hate each other, and that's another rivalry. That's one thing that Bob Thompson said in August, and it's part of my mantra now: rivalries, rivalries, rivalries. That's what's going to drive money and influence in the future. And if they can secure those, it'll really help the Big 12 not only be solidified as 3, but I think it might even increase their media pay.
Looking at that word rivalries, where the Big 12 sits, there's not a lot of good ones. The current state of this conference, the 12 teams you have you have the Red River, which is one of the premier in college football. That is now obviously gone. Oklahoma State, maybe right behind that. That is now gone. Baylor TCU is there, but it's one of those that had the weird cutoff 10 years ago, and since then TCU's honestly dominated it. To me, there has to be at some point, all right, we've got to create something. Arkansas, Missouri created a rivalry 10 years ago. It didn't work. Nobody wanted it. The fan bases couldn't care less. The schools told them, hey, this is a rivalry now. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
You have to have heated battles that go back and forth. It's got to create organically. And to me, BYU and Baylor are right. I think it would be a mistake from Brett Yormark's point to not play BYU and Baylor every year in a marquee game to create a rivalry.
I agree with you, and I think maybe this year they're taking the 1 year off because they did have the 2 back-to-back years in games. But I think all 3 religious schools, TCU, Baylor, and BYU, they have a lot of things in common, and that commonality there's no reason it can't be contentious, right? You don't have to be this really overbearing, we hate you so much, we're going to burn down your house type of rivalry. But you do want the schools that are aligned in some way, shape, or form, something that's common. The Pac-12 tried to get Utah and Colorado to be a rivalry. Has that been a rivalry? It isn't. You can't manufacture them. And these 3 schools have a long history. They all know each other. The administrations are very close, and I think it would be perfect. So in my opinion, I think that tripartite, if you want to call it that, that group could easily become right at the top of the table. There's others. I'd love to have Oklahoma State be with BYU. I think that would be good. But in England, they have these matches, and they're called rivalries for a reason. And these schools these professional teams hate each other, right? Yep. And I think that's what drives business. So I think that's what they ought to do.
Before we get you out of here, Mafia, we've talked a lot of business, talked a lot about the Pac-12, and we've gotten that 30,000-foot view. But now, dude, let's just rip it open. Opinions here. From a BYU standpoint, how do you view the Baylor Bears?
Well, we have history. We've seen them the last 2 years. I think it's going to come down to how well Shapen plays. Yeah. I think he's a good quarterback, but he hasn't shown the creativity that I think that Aranda wanted out of him when they brought him out. So if they can, in some way, he plays better, their defense is always going to be good. Their offensive line's always going to be good. They have amazing skill players. So I think Baylor could win 8-9 games this year. But if he doesn't play well, they could also end up on a 5-6. And that would be sad because they've had a team now for a couple of years that I think has been right there in talent with everybody. I mean, they should have beat TCU.
Should have. Thanks for bringing that one up. That lives in the old nightmares. Nathan, Big 12 Media Mafia. Look, Nathan's a great name, but Big 12 Mafia is the premier name. I wish I would have gotten there first.
Wow, really? You think so?
There's something to it. It rolls off the tongue. If folks want to find your content, and I know it's all great. I've watched it for a while now. Had the awesome opportunity to join your show last week. Where can they find your content? Because it's consistent. It's damn good.
On YouTube, it's at B12 Mafia. Just do a search, and if you do Big 12 Mafia, it'll also show up. Also on Twitter, I'm at B12 Mafia, and then I'm also at BYU_bomber with a 3.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining the show today and giving us your insight on the Pac-12, the Big 12, BYU, and Baylor.
I can't wait to do it again, Drake. We got to keep this going.
Absolutely, especially as this football season and a wild new era of college football kicks off. For you at home, thanks for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Come back on Wednesday. Baylor's offense, top 5 players. Who's going to make the money this year? If the Bears are going to win the games, who's got to get it done? All that and more on your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. This is Locked On Baylor.
Peace.